Story time about how my husband hired a really hot assistant and now I want him to fire her, but he won't. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I have been together for 4 years. Now, I've never suspected him of cheating, but I have caught him lying to me a few times. A few years back, I checked his Facebook Messenger and caught him messaging another girl. The messages weren't exactly inappropriate, but they were definitely flirty. When I asked him if he was messaging anyone on Facebook, he denied it. That's when I unleashed the beast and told him that I had seen the messages. That's when he told me that he wanted to break up because he didn't want to stop messaging her. This was some random girl that he had met at his job. We actually did break up for a few days, but then he literally begged me on his knees to stay with him. Then I caught him lying a second time. He told me he was going out to dinner with a friend of his who I already knew, and it was a woman. I had no problem with him going out to dinner with her because we already knew each other from a few years back. At the time, I was away for work. After 8 hours, he still hadn't messaged me. I decided to call him, but he didn't answer. That's when I tracked his location and realized that he was somewhere in the city. He finally messaged me telling me that he was home and he was trying to get to sleep. I took a screenshot of his location and sent it to him. Then he called me begging me for forgiveness. He told me he thought I'd probably get jealous if he knew that he was still with her. Obviously, I wasn't going to get jealous. It was just more upsetting that he lied to me. All of that was a few years ago. Since then, he's always been on his best behavior. About a year ago, my husband started a new company and it's been very successful. So successful that he's hired a full staff. Up until now, all of them have been men. But about a week ago, he told me he needed an assistant. That's when I told him I knew a friend of mine who needed a job. This woman is much older than us and would never be interested in my husband. But my husband told me that he was looking for somebody younger and someone that was interested in the field of work. A few days after that, he had finally hired somebody. I didn't really think anything of it though. By the way, I work in financing, so I'm usually working from home. My husband and I usually meet up for lunch, so I decided to go pick him up from work. But when I got there, a young hot girl asked me if I had an appointment to see my own husband. I told her I was the owner's wife and she laughed it off. She then apologized really quickly but didn't really mean it. Let me tell you how this girl was dressed. She wore a crop top and super tight leggings. She also had a full face of makeup on and her hair was freshly curled. It looked like she was dressed to go to a club, or at least trying to impress someone. Part 2 is up. Part 2, am I the asshole for wanting my husband to fire his hot assistant? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. After I told her I was the owner's wife, she made sure to stand up and show off her body to me. That's when I saw how tight all her clothes were. She then waltzed into my husband's office and tells him that I'm there. My husband quickly came out, almost running, and I asked him if everything was okay. That's when he said, yes, I just wanted to introduce you to my new assistant. Her name is Anna. Anna and I shook hands and I could feel that her palms were sweaty. That's when I knew something was up. My husband told her that she could leave for the day since he was going to be gone for a few hours. And guess what? She insisted on staying until he got back. And it's like she was doing it all because I was there. When my husband and I finally got into the car, I told him that I wanted him to fire her. He started to laugh and asked me why. I told him that the way she was dressed was incredibly inappropriate and that it looked like she was about to go party with all the makeup and hair that she had on. And of course, he told me I was overreacting and that he wouldn't fire her. Then he kissed me and reassured me that he wasn't even attracted to her. I asked him why he hired her and he told me that she was really smart and fast. Then I told him that if he didn't fire her, that him and I would have problems. He got in a bad mood for the rest of the day. Part 3 is up. Part 3, am I the asshole for wanting my husband to fire his hot assistant? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. After the second time I told him to fire her, he once again said no and got in a really bad mood for the rest of the day. That's when I told him that it was clear that she had a thing for him and that she was obviously dressing up and putting on all that makeup and hair just for him. He told me that she had a boyfriend and that she wasn't interested in him like that. But I don't believe it at all. You know, women's intuition? From the moment I met her, I got the feeling she was trying to show off her body and her palms were sweaty as in she was nervous. That's when I decided I would go to my husband's office every single day. And guess what? I decided to dress up too. I put on a sexy outfit to pick up my husband the following day, and she was dressed in the exact same way. Super tight leggings, crop top, and showing off cleavage. Her hair and makeup were done again. As soon as she saw me coming into the office, she gave me a really dirty look. I asked her if anything was wrong and she said no. I couldn't help myself and I told her that the way she looked at me was weird. Then she apologized and told me that she didn't mean anything by it. My husband came out of his office and told me that Anna, his assistant, had already brought him lunch and that he didn't need to go to lunch with me. I was furious. I gave my husband a kiss and went home. I insisted once again that he needed to fire her later and he said no. So guess what I did? I got myself a really hot personal trainer. Of course, my husband got really jealous. I told him that I wouldn't stop working out with him until he fires his assistant. He thinks I'm being terrible for wanting him to fire her, but I don't trust that girl one bit. And I can't say I trust my husband 100%. Am I the asshole? Anyway, my trainer has been flirting with me hardcore. I'm planning on making my husband as jealous as possible. Bye.
Super toxic boyfriend story time. My boyfriend and I were together for 2 years. When it was good, it was extremely good, but when it was bad, it was extremely bad. There were many times in the relationship when we would break up and get back together. After our 2-year anniversary, I noticed he became extremely distant. One night when we were laying in bed together and watching TV, I saw a Snapchat pop up on his phone that looked suspicious. I asked him who it is and he said it was just a friend. I asked him to open it and he said no, then moved the phone behind my head to check it. I grabbed his phone and checked his Snapchat. In the conversation, there was a bunch of nudes from him and the girl back and forth. Somehow he manipulated and gaslighted me to think that it was from before we dated and that I was being crazy for no reason. Unfortunately, I believed him. A few months later, he pressured me to let him move in with me even though I wasn't ready. He cried and sobbed until I said yes. It was the biggest mistake because after that, he became even more toxic. He would follow random cars, swearing that he saw me inside them with other people. He would also go through my phone and text my friends telling them that I couldn't hang out or do things with them because he felt threatened that I was going to eventually date them. I pretty much put up with all of this until one day he came home and started flipping out on me for taking a freaking nap. One day I was taking a nap in my bedroom, so I locked the door. My boyfriend wasn't home, but my roommates were and I was really tired, so I didn't want to be bothered. A couple hours later, my boyfriend gets home and starts banging on the door and announcing his arrival. You know those naps that you take and then you wake up and you have no idea what's going on for like 5 minutes? That was me. I told him to give me a second to come and open the door, but he started flipping out. For some reason, he thought that I was in there with someone else. When I opened the door, he busted in, slammed the door, and started screaming at me. He was going absolutely ballistic and calling me names. I tried to calm him down, but he grabbed me by my wrist and threw me on the bed. He held me down and kept screaming at me. That's when I broke up with him and told him to get out of the room. Later that day, he begged for us to talk. He laid on me and cried for 30 minutes. He just sobbed and asked me to take him back over and over again. I started having an anxiety attack and told him to get off of me, but he just kept crying and wouldn't let me go. After what felt like a lifetime, he let me go and I broke up with him for good. But for a while, he was relentless in trying to get me back. He would follow me home from work, cry and sob to take him back, and called his mom to tell me to take him back too. None of it worked and I'm happier than I've ever been now.
This story time is how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15 and I found out he was 32. By the way, we're calling him Jake. So I met Jake at a college party and I was able to go because my sister had just entered college and I begged her to take me. So I had fun. I ended up meeting Jake, and from there we started talking. He told me he was still in college, and of course I told him I was still in high school. At the time he told me he was 18 and he slightly looked older, but I guess he just looked older for his age. And I know we weren't supposed to date at these ages, but my dad was 5 years older than my mom and I didn't think that it was that bad being 3 years apart. We were together for 10 months. When my birthday came around, he wanted to take me out on a date. He picked me up from home and drove me to a restaurant, and 5 minutes before we get to the restaurant, he gets pulled over for not having his lights on. The cops asked for his ID, he showed the cops, and he put it down. I took a look at his ID, and it said he was born in the 1980s. It gets really bad after this. Let me know if y'all want a part 2. This is part 2 of how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15 and I found out he was 32. So like I said earlier, he had got pulled over by the cops and he asked for his ID. When he had got it back, he had put his ID in his cup holder. I took a glance and I saw he was born in the 1980s. When the cops left, we drove off. Then I asked him, Jake, how old are you again? He's like, 18. Why'd you ask that? I picked up his ID and pushed it into his face. He quickly steps on the brake and snatches it from me. I was like, take me home. He said, no, it's a fake ID. I was like, what do you need a fake ID for? Where's your real one? He looked at me in shock. Then I told him I wanted to leave. I try to open up the car door to leave and he tells me, you're not going nowhere. Guys, this is when it gets really scary. Y'all let me know if y'all want a part 3. This is part 3 of how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15 and I found out he was 32. Okay, so like I said before, I saw his ID and I could tell he was lying about how it was fake. So I immediately wanted to get out. I try to open up the door, but it doesn't open. I told him to let me out. He responds, you're not going anywhere and you're not leaving me. I then start pushing on him to get me out. He stops and says, if you keep pushing on me, we're going to crash. So I grabbed my phone and I called the police. He took my phone and threw it out the window. And I'm like, where the hell are you taking me? Guys, this is when it gets really dangerous. Y'all let me know if I should make a part 4.
Story time about my really toxic ex-boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. So, my boyfriend, we'll call him Henry. Henry and I were together for about 1 month. And he decided when we started dating that he didn't want to tell anyone about our relationship because he was too embarrassed for people to know about our relationship. Which obviously hurt, but I ignored it because I was just glad that we were finally in a relationship. Me and Henry were both in this group called Navy Cadets, and our Navy Cadets group was supposed to be staying on this large ship for 2 nights, and as you can guess, I was very excited for this trip. On Friday afternoon, I got a call from Henry while I was on the school bus waiting to go home, and he said that he wants to break up with me. I acted like I didn't care, but as soon as I got home, I broke down crying. Then, not too long later, he called me. He said the real reason why he broke up with me was because he cheated on me, and he felt bad. This is where it gets crazy. Part 2's already up. Part 2 about my really toxic ex-boyfriend. I was so angry, not only because he cheated on me, but the fact that he broke up with me so that I couldn't break up with him over cheating on me. The next day, the bus picked me up from outside of my house so we could go on the cadets trip. Henry was already on the bus and he was sitting behind me and my other friend and was making comments like, "Why aren't you talking to me? Do you hate me?" I was still so mad at him, but I kept it all in and just ignored him. We got to the ship and that night was great. There was even fireworks. It was so beautiful. Then my guy best friend, we'll call him Andy, came up to me and asked me to be his girlfriend. Now, I know I probably should have said no because I was still interested in Henry, my ex-boyfriend, and since we just broke up, and I didn't really like Andy like that. But we were going to be in the ship for a whole nother day, and I didn't really want to ruin his trip, let alone be stuck with Andy while he's upset at me. So, I said yes. This is where it gets nuts. Come back for part 3. Part 3. Things between me and Andy were very awkward the next day, but we still ended up having fun anyways. Later that day, we got back to the bus so we could all go home. I sat down, and my ex-boyfriend Henry sat right behind me again. He tapped me on the shoulder and asked why I'm already dating someone new. I went off at him and told him if he wanted a girl to talk to, go talk to the girl he cheated on me with. I was still so hurt by what Henry did to me. He even said he still loved me, and that he knew I still liked him, which I did. Henry ended up saying that I need to make a choice between him and my guy best friend Andy, aka my new boyfriend. I was so confused on what to do. The next day at school, I went up to Andy and told him I wanted to break up with him because it was too soon after I just broke up with Henry. Andy was very upset and didn't talk to me for a while. When I told Henry, he thought I had chose him. But I replied with, "No, I chose neither of you. I shouldn't have to choose between the both of you. I love you both too much." That's the end of the story. Follow for more.
Story time about how I exposed my abusive, toxic boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend is and has always been very charming. He has a ton of friends and everyone loves him. He's a very good-looking guy and girls are always chasing him. I met him 2 years ago at a party. I had heard a bunch of stuff about him. I heard that he was a player and that he cheated on all of his girlfriends. So when he came up to me at the party, I was really cold. I basically told him I didn't want to talk to him and that I would never give him my number. And unfortunately, this made him try even harder. He could never take no for an answer. He spent an hour trying to convince me to go to have breakfast with him the next day. He was so charming and so good looking, of course I eventually said yes. Even a few of his guy friends at the party told me not to go. But of course, I ended up going with him to breakfast the next day. We hung out a few times and then he told me that he liked that I wasn't easy. He told me that I was different from other girls and he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes because I was starting to catch feelings. One night we went out with his friends and he started calling me stupid in front of them. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I exposed my abusive, toxic boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So we went out with his friends one night and he started calling me stupid in front of them. He had never done this before and I was really surprised. I thought maybe he was just doing it to impress his guy friends. That's when I asked him straight up in front of his friends why he kept calling me stupid. One of his friends steps up and says, "Yeah, why do you keep calling her stupid?" He stayed quiet for a second and didn't know what to say. Then he just laughed it off and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was doing that." That's when his friends started asking me questions about myself. I told them I was studying to be an engineer and that I had graduated with top honors. Well, let's just say they were all super impressed. We finally got into his car and he was driving me home. I was upset at him, so I decided not to give him a kiss goodnight. I started getting out of the car and he grabbed my wrist really hard. He pulled me back into the car and forcefully kissed me. He said that I embarrassed him in front of his friends, but that he'd give me a pass for it. I was actually in shock. A few weeks later, we were at the mall and he pulled my hair because he said I was looking at some guy. I tried to get up and leave and he wouldn't let me. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I exposed my abusive, toxic boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So at the mall, he pulled my hair back because he thought I was looking at a guy. Then I tried to get up from the table, but he wouldn't let me. That's when he said he was going to have to control me more from now on, because clearly I was trying to look for other guys. Then he dropped me off at my dorm room and insisted on coming up. I told him I didn't want him to and that we should reconsider the relationship. I told him he needed to cool off and reconsider how he treated me. That's when he started to cry instantly. He started apologizing and told me that I was right. Then he told me that he loved me. We hadn't used that word before. I didn't realize at the time that he was totally manipulating me. And unfortunately, I decided to give him another chance. A few days later, he asked me why I didn't tell him I loved him back. I told him I just wasn't sure. Then he started yelling at me, telling me that there were so many girls ready for him to be single, and that he had a girl text him every single night, but he would say no just because of me. So I told him I loved him. After that, he was a lot nicer. Until one night, he slapped me. Part 4 is up.
Story time for my trash bag ex-boyfriend, because I'm finally at a point with this info that it's less trauma, more humorous. So let's humor in this together. The day I knew I was going to break up with him was a special day. We were actually out in a canoe and he was screaming his head off at me. And he often screamed and yelled directly in my face in a very scary way. But it was because of this canoe, like it was because of the situation that I finally found it funny. Like I almost got freaky. I think they call them church giggles because apparently you're not supposed to like giggle in churches, but you know, church giggles, like inappropriate giggles. I got them on the boat when he was screaming at me because I was in a canoe. I was like, I'm being screamed at in a canoe. And that's what I knew. That's what did it. So I'm thankful for that canoe ride. The things that happened after that when I tried breaking up with him were not funny at all. But I think about that sometimes.
Toxic best friend story time. So I had an off and on friendship with this one girl. In my freshman year, we became friends again. And she had this boyfriend named Nicholas. And they literally fought 24/7. And every time she would fight, she would be like, can you please fix this for me? So she would have me add him on Snapchat, fix it, and then block him. And guys, this literally was happening like 5 times a week. And then after she asked me to do that the first few times, I realized she started going through my phone. And when I say my phone, I mean my whole motherfucking phone. A bitch was going through my Snapchats, DMs, text messages, and I didn't know how to confront her because that's just weird. So the one day I was getting ready at her house because we were about to go out, and she was like, I'm grounded, can I use your phone real quick? And I was like, yeah, just let me Snapchat this last person back. And she goes, no, and rips the phone out of my hand. And she starts going through my Snapchat right in front of me. And I had a streak with this kid named Nick. She goes up to me and says, what the fuck is this? Like for part 2. Okay guys, I'm making the part 2 right now and I'm literally laying in bed. I took off my makeup and you guys have to realize that I literally do these videos at like 10 o'clock at night and they get posted at like 1 in the morning and then I go to bed at like 2. And for all of you commenting I'm clout chasing, bro, chill out. It's been like 3 hours. So anyway, she comes up to me and shoves the phone in my face and goes, who the fuck is this? And I literally looked at her and started laughing my ass off. And she was like, what the fuck is so funny, Kaylee, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, go ahead, hold on the name. And she held on the name and realized it wasn't her fucking boyfriend. So I packed up my things while she literally went and sat on her bed and started crying. She was like, I don't want to lose my best friend. So fast forward, her and her boyfriend broke up. Her and I weren't friends anymore. And then she would always try to accuse me of getting with him. Moral of the story, don't get involved in other people's relationships.
Makeup story time. So, I had a bad dream about my man, of him cheating on me. Okay, so I woke up and I was like, you know what? You're a serial cheater. And now it's in my soul that he is a serial cheater. So all day today I've been calling him a serial cheater. And he's like, you can't blame me for what happened in your dream. And I'm like, but you are responsible for your behavior in my spirit world and in my reality. So if you can't check your spirit self that invited himself into my dream, we have a problem. So I've been calling him a serial cheater and he's like telling me to stop, and he's like, it's not even that serious, but it's serious. And I just need to know, what am I supposed to do with this information? Like, what am I supposed to do? Because in my dream, this bro had multiple chicks. Like, it wasn't just one chick, and it wasn't like dream-like. It was like very real life-like. So it's like 7 a.m. and he's like telling me don't start, you know? And it's just kind of like, you know what? I'm just over it. I'm over the lies. I'm over the deceit. I'm fed up. You know what I mean? I'm fed up. Like, sincerely, I'm fed up. And now it's like, what am I supposed to do for the remainder of the day? Trust you? Trust you? Anyways, moral of the story is no one is to be trusted. Like, they're still not shit, even in your dreams, you know what I mean? Like, they can't even let you have your dream. Like, they can't even just let you be peaceful in your dream. Like, they have to, like, they'll find a way to fuck you up if they can. And I don't feel like nothing's gonna slide. Not in real life, not in my spirit world. It won't slide. If you're gonna act out, we're gonna handle it accordingly. Peace.
Did anyone else plan on staying single after their toxic ex but ended up finding their
I have a
soulmate?
story time for this one, and I will try and do it all in one part. So here we go. I'm going to take y'all back to January of 2016. My ex and I, who was very, very toxic while I was in college, had broken up. And it wasn't like we had broken up on good terms, I guess. I basically needed to be on my own down in Florida and figure out what I wanted with my life and kind of that kind of situation. So fast forward to April 1st of 2016, I get a phone call from my ex and he's like, I'm coming to Florida. We're going to fix this. And I was like, please don't. Needless to say, I got called horrible things over the phone saying that I was hooking up with other people down here, which I wasn't. A whole bunch of other really, really, really bad, like mentally abusive things. Well, my way of handling that was I went to Epcot, as all Disney cast members do. So I was walking around and I went to the Japan Pavilion, and where they have the little makeup, like pick a pearl, make a jewelry. I decided, you know what? I'm going to spend some money on myself. I need a me day. So I decided to make a necklace. Okay, so this is the pearl that I picked and the necklace that I ended up making. So the lady, when she went to, before she opened the pearl, told me I had to make a wish on this pearl. It was going to be my promise pearl. And I was like, okay. She was like, so make a promise to yourself. And once you like achieve that promise and you succeed, you can like take the necklace off. And I was like, okay. So I made a promise myself, did not tell any of my friends, any of my family what this promise was. Needless to say, my promise was that I was not going to date anyone unless it was the person that I was going to marry. I know, sounds a little rash, but after what I had dealt with earlier that day, it was the most logical decision for me. So fast forward 5 days, that's it, 5 days, until I met Josh. We met while mini golfing. It was a completely spur of the moment, random thing. There was no reason we should have met in that situation at that date, on that time, any of it. So needless to say, my necklace, that became a huge important piece for me, and I wore that necklace everywhere. Like, I think that was the only piece of jewelry I wore for months. And then when Josh proposed in 2017, a year and a few months later, I had taken it off, and one of my friends asked me, she goes, oh, you're not wearing your pearl necklace, why? And I told them all this whole story, and I said, you know, when you least expect it, the right things happen. Because had I met Josh any earlier, I would not have been mentally ready, emotionally ready, or anything else. So be patient. I know it sucks at this moment, but there is happiness out there for you. I did it all in one part.
How my ex used to text me when we were broken up. Why are you going to Taylor's house? How do you know that? Just answer the question. Am going to a party? Will guys be there? You broke up with me today, why do you care? Well, so there will be. Have fun being a slut. Am going to see my friends. Ufao? Thirst trappin' for other dudes. How? I can see the arch in your back, you slut. Come over to talk. Okay. I think we should break up again.
Story time about how my obsessive ex tried to kidnap me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My obsessive ex and I met 3 years ago. We both live in LA and met on set on a modeling job. The first day that we met, he was totally cool, really friendly. Obviously, he was very good looking, so I liked him. But I had just gotten out of a serious relationship, so I had no intention on dating anyone. When he asked me for my phone number after the photo shoot finished, I politely said no. But guess what? The following day, I got a text message from him. He told me he asked the makeup artist artist for my phone number and she gave it to him. I told him that he shouldn't have done that because I had told him I didn't want to give him my phone number, but he explained that he really liked me and that all he wanted to do was just hang out like friends. At the time, I had no friends in LA. I mean, even now I only have like one good friend, so I accepted to go have breakfast with him the following day. And of course, he was the most charming guy I had ever met. And weirdly enough, we had the exact same interests. I loved horseback riding, painting, and cooking. And that's when he told me that he also loved horseback riding, painting, and cooking. He even showed me some of his paintings that he had hung up at his apartment. After that, we hung out occasionally. He would come over to my place and I would cook and we would watch a movie. After a few weeks, he invited me to hang out with his guy friends. We had a really great time and all of his guy friends really enjoyed my company. But toward the end of the night, I could tell that he was getting really jealous. When he took me home, he asked me if I liked his friends. And of course, I said no. Then he said that it looked like I was having a little too much fun with them. But here's the thing, the way he said it was really cute, like almost endearing, like I actually felt bad for him. So at that time, it didn't really freak me out. We didn't speak for a few days and I realized that I was actually missing him. So I reached out and asked him if he wanted to go on an official date. And he said of course. After that first date, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. Things moved really quickly after that. He moved into my apartment, we got a dog, and we met each other's families. For 2 months, everything was going really, really well. I was pretty happy with the relationship, I loved our new dog, and we were both getting a lot of modeling work individually. Especially me. I got a campaign with a pretty big designer and it was my dream come true. I had to travel to Italy for the campaign and he got very jealous. He started asking me questions like who's gonna be there? Do you already know the other models? And of course I didn't. I had no idea who was gonna be there or who the other models were gonna be. This was pretty much the beginning of the end. I was in Italy for 2 weeks, and while I was there, he would constantly call me, text me, check up on me. It even started affecting the work I was doing. I would run to my phone in between shots just to answer it so that he wouldn't think I was doing something bad. The photographer even asked me to put my phone away, and I did. Of course, this made him freak out. The following day, he shows up at my hotel. He told me that I needed to start behaving like his girlfriend. Then he started going to all the photo shoots with me. He would watch me like a hawk while I was working. Things Get Scary Part 2 is Part 2 of how my obsessive ex tried to kidnap me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After he acted really controlling and jealous in Italy, I decided to break up with him. When we got back to LA, I told him he needed to move out. He totally freaked out, grabbed my phone and threw it up against the wall. I kicked him out and told him never to come back. The following day, I had to go buy a new phone, and I told him that if he wanted to come pick up his stuff, he could. Luckily, he took all his stuff when I wasn't there, and he even left his apartment key. I thought it was all over. 3 days later, he started blowing up my phone asking if we could talk. I told him I didn't want him coming into my apartment anymore. We agreed to meet in the parking garage so that I could give him a few things he forgot, which of course he left in my apartment so that he had a reason to come back. He finally arrived and asked me to get in the car, but I told him I would not get in the car. Then he started crying and begging for me to get in the car. I had never seen him like this, so I got into the car. He instantly locked all the doors and wouldn't let me out. Then he started driving really fast. I told him to let me out of the car and he said no. I asked him where we were going, but he wouldn't tell me. We finally got into a red light and I managed to unlock the door and get out. I ran straight into a restaurant and I asked them to call the cops, but he came running in after me. Luckily, a few of the servers stopped him before he could reach me. I asked them to take him out and lock the door. I called 911 and told them everything. Within 2 minutes, a police officer was there. And when he searched my ex's car, he found rope, duct tape, and sleeping pills. The officer told me it would be easy to get a restraining order. I called my parents and they flew in straight away. They luckily arrested him that night. When my parents and I went to the police the following day, they told us that they let him out on bail and that they couldn't keep him in there because technically he hadn't done anything illegal. That's when it hit me. I was never going to be safe again as long as he was out there. Later on that day, I found out that one of his cousins is an attorney and that he would do anything to keep him out of jail. So I took it upon myself to do something. I called his modeling agency and told them about everything, and they dropped him from the agency. I moved out of my apartment and got a new phone number, but unfortunately, this hasn't stopped him from finding me. Sometimes I see his car around my neighborhood, and I know that he's made several fake accounts to follow me on Instagram. My parents want me to move back home, but I don't want to. I don't think I should live in fear of him. 2 days ago, he sent me an email and asked me if we could get together and talk. Of course, I said no, but maybe I can reason with him? I don't know. What do you guys think I should do? Story time about how my date turned out to be a serial killer. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I recently got promoted at my job and had to move to a new city. I didn't know anyone in this new city, so I decided to sign up for some dating apps. Within a few days, I was already talking to some guys. One of them in particular was really nice and I could tell he was really trying to get to know me. So I gave him my phone number. From there, we texted for about a full week. He would say good morning and good night. He would always ask me questions and act like he was just really interested in me. I decided that I really liked him and I told him. That's when he asked me if I wanted to go on a date, and of course, I said yes. We decided to meet up for dinner during the weekend. On the morning of the date, I sent him a text message saying good morning. I didn't hear anything back from him. At first, I thought maybe he's just stuck at work. An hour before the date, I still hadn't heard from him, so I decided to send him a text, and he did not reply. So of course, I ended up going to dinner by myself anyway. But when I got home, I had a message from him apologizing for standing me up. When I asked him what happened, he told me that he got stuck at work. And I decided to believe him. I had no reason not to trust him. I decided to give him a second chance when he asked me out again. The following weekend, we decided to have a picnic. But same thing, a few hours before the date, I still hadn't heard from him. That's when I sent him a message asking him if he was going to show up or not. And I didn't hear anything from him for a few hours. Finally, he messaged me once again saying that he got stuck at work. He begged me for another chance, and I said yes. A few days later on the news, I saw that 2 women had disappeared after going on a date with some guy. And both of the women had disappeared in the area that I lived in. When I told my parents about it, they urged me not to go on any dates. So I decided not to tell them that I actually had a date that week. The following day, we meet at the restaurant. As soon as I see him, he's really sweaty and nervous. And when he hugged me, he smelled really bad. As in B.O. I didn't want to judge him, but I asked him if he was okay. That's when he told me that he'd been working every single day nonstop. Then I look at his fingernails and they're full of dirt and what seemed like some red stuff. I asked him what he did for work again, and you'll never guess what he said. He said he was in murders and acquisitions. Then he laughed. This is where it gets scary. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my date turned out to be a serial unaliver. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. On the date, I noticed that his fingernails were dirty, he was really sweaty, and he smelled really bad. When I asked him what he did again for a living, he told me he was in murders and acquisitions. Then he started laughing maniacally. He told me it was a joke and it was a line from one of his favorite movies, American Psycho. I tried to laugh it off with him, but I just couldn't get past his whole demeanor. Then he started just doing bizarre things. He ordered tons of food, steak, chicken, pasta, nachos, salad, and he ate all of it. But the way he was eating was so aggressive, it was like he hadn't eaten in days. By the way, at this point, we hadn't followed each other on social media. So I told him I wanted to go to the bathroom. When I got to the bathroom, I started looking up his Instagram. He had a profile, but not many pictures on it. Then I started looking through his tagged pictures, but again, nothing. It was like he didn't exist outside of the dating app. I decided I'd stay for the date, but then I wouldn't speak to him again. When I got back to the table, he started asking me a lot of questions. Like, did I live by myself? Have I ever shot any weapons? I mean, what kind of question is that on a first date? Then out of nowhere, he asked me if I wanted to go to his lake house. He quickly pulled up his phone and showed me a few pictures. I finally asked him again what he did for a living. He told me that his parents are very wealthy and they own several ranches, and that he basically did all the marketing for them. Then he abruptly ended the date. I mean, trust me, I wanted to go home anyway, but it's the way he did it. I told him I probably wouldn't have time to go to the lake house. Then he called a server over and gave them his black card, which is a pretty good indication if someone has money. Then he went to the bathroom. At this point, I just wanted to make a run for it. He comes back out, grabs his card from the server, and tells me goodnight. As we're walking out of the restaurant, he stops me and tries to kiss me. Of course, I turned my face away. Then he said, "Ah, you're a fighter, aren't ya?" He then got in his car and simply drove away without saying a word. The following day on the news, I hear about another missing woman. Part 3 is up. Part 2 of how my date turned out to be a serial unaliver. Disclaimers is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. If you haven't seen part 2, go watch it. The following day, I hear that another woman is missing. This is when they showed a description of the man they think kidnapped the women, and it looked exactly like my date. They even mentioned the dating app that he used, which is the same one we met on. So I decided that after work, I would go to the police myself. I spoke to the detective and gave him all the information. His name, his social media, his dating profile, and I even told him about how he behaved on the first date. Later on that night, I got home and blocked him from everything. 2 days later, the police show up to my job and told me that they caught him. And when they went to search his lake house, they found the missing women. Apparently, he would lure women to his lake house and keep them there for days, eventually unaliving them. The police told me that if I hadn't followed my instincts, I might have ended up like they did. He's now in maximum prison, and somehow he managed to send me a letter. I burnt it as soon as I got it. Apparently, he still wants to talk to me. Never trust someone you meet online. Story time about how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm now 24, but 10 years ago, a new girl moved into our town. Her and I quickly became best friends in school. She would always come over to my house and have dinner with me and my parents. My parents really grew to love her because she was so polite and really cared about me. The only thing was that she never wanted me to go over to her house. At first, I thought it might be because she was embarrassed of her house or something. And eventually I asked her and she told me that her dad was abusive towards her mom and that was the reason why she didn't want me to come over. I felt terrible that she had to live like that, so I expressed to my mom that I was really concerned about her. So my mom actually asked my best friend if she wanted to come live with us for a little bit. Let's call my best friend Sarah. Sarah said no because she wanted to be with her mom. But my mom really wanted to help Sarah and her mom. My mom was in an abusive relationship herself when she was younger, so she understood what Sarah and her mom were going through. My mom decided to invite Sarah's mom over for dinner. That's when my mom asked her about their living situation, and Sarah's mom confessed that it was pretty bad. My mom suggested that she should try to get a divorce, and a few weeks later, she filed for divorce. We were all so happy because this meant things would get better for Sarah and her mom. And things did get better. Her dad moved out to his own apartment, and a few weeks later, he had a new girlfriend. I was able to stay over at Sarah's house, and it was really fun. One of the times that I was with Sarah at her house, her dad showed up. But he started making me feel really uncomfortable. He told Sarah that I was the prettiest friend she'd ever had. I could see him staring at me. After he left, Sarah apologized. I went home and tried not to think about it. A few days later, I was walking home when Sarah's dad pulled up next to me. Part 2 is up. Part 3 of how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I called the police to tell him that his girlfriend was following me. That's when the cops said that I could probably get a restraining order against him and his girlfriend. Sarah and her mom came over to our house after they heard what happened. Of course, they felt really bad, but they weren't surprised. Sarah told me that that's why she never wanted me to come over because her dad had commented things about her friends before. Worst of all is that they couldn't keep him in jail for what he did to me, but a few months later he was finally put into prison because of something else he did. Apparently he had tried to steal a car or something. Remember the crazy girlfriend I told you Sarah's dad had? She kept following me for a long time. She would even show up to my school asking me if I wanted a ride home. Eventually I was able to get a restraining order against her, but she was really scary. A few years ago she tried to follow me on Instagram. I had to block and report her. I mean, what kind of woman would fight for a man like that? The good news is Sarah and I are still good friends to this day. We even went to college together and now have steady boyfriends. Even Sarah's mom remarried and she's really happy with her husband. I look back at what happened as a learning experience, but to be honest, if he ever gets out of prison, I'm scared. Shout out to my follower Remy for always supporting me and watching my lives. If you want a shout out, watch my lives to get picked. Bye. Story time about how I'm still in love with my toxic ex. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is really complicated, but please hear me out before you start judging me in the comments. Ex and I dated for exactly 1 year. When we first met, he was super charming, cute. I mean, he was like the perfect boyfriend. My family loved him, but gradually he started changing. The more serious we got about the relationship, the worse he became. For example, at the beginning of our relationship, we always used to hang out with our friends. And sometimes I would hang out with my own friends on my own. But 2 months into the relationship, he began guilting me. He would tell me that I would rather hang out with my friends, which wasn't even true. And then I would end up staying home and then he would go out with his friends. He would also tell my parents sometimes that I needed to be taught lessons, like how to respect men and stuff. My parents detested him. One time he came over for Thanksgiving and basically told me that I needed to go change my clothes. He even said that I looked like a whore in front of my cousin. After that, my cousin really hated him and began doing her own research. She found that he was liking girls' pictures on Instagram and that he was leaving dirty comments on their pictures. Once she found all this information, she told me and I confronted him. He told me that he had every right to comment on anyone's pictures because it was just the internet and it wasn't real life. I kind of had to accept what he said because I didn't want any more problems. I asked my cousin to stop searching stuff, but she just didn't let up. Almost every single week, she would send me screenshots of things that he'd comment on girls' pictures. Finally, I told my boyfriend that my cousin had found all this out, and he basically forced me to cut her out of my life. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I stay with him? But when things were good, they were really good. He was super loving, affectionate, affectionate. He always wanted to be with me, and he always prioritized going on dates and having fun. He would always surprise me with fun things. One time he planned this beautiful picnic, and we even stayed in the park and spent the night there. But then he would manage to ruin everything by becoming really jealous and controlling. My dream job was to work in marketing, and I just happened to land this internship at a really popular fashion magazine. When I told him I got the job, he acted really strange. He didn't even congratulate me. A few hours later, he told me that I was trying too hard and that he didn't want a girlfriend that was going to be at work all the time. He also asked me how much I was going to be getting paid because he wanted to make sure it was less than what he earned. So in other words, he was jealous and envious at the same time. Then he insisted that I work around his schedule, so I could only work the days that he was working. Then he told me that if I wasn't spending enough time with him because of my new job, he would break up with me. I took that as the last straw. It was my dream job, but he was making everything terrible. While my entire family was so happy for me, I was crying in bed at night. The next morning, I woke up and texted him and told him that I didn't want to see him. He ran straight to my house. We got in his car to talk, and I proceeded to tell him everything I thought. Then he turned it all around and told me that I wasn't the girl that he fell in love with, and that if I didn't change, he would break up with me. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm still in love with my extremely toxic ex. After I told him that I needed him to change, he basically turned everything around and told me that I wasn't the girl that he fell in love with anymore, and that I was the one that needed to change if I wanted to continue in the relationship. And to top it all off, he kicked me out of his car. We didn't speak for about 2 weeks. During that time, I started at my dream job, and everything was actually going pretty well. I didn't have the pressure on top of me about him not wanting me to work, and my life was actually getting better. My skin started clearing up, and I even started losing weight. In other words, I was really happy. My parents and family were so happy too. But then I see that he starts posting other girls on his Instagram. I knew that he was doing it on purpose, so I tried not to get upset, but I just couldn't help it. Then I made a huge mistake. I messaged him and asked him if he still loved me. Then he called me and we talked on the phone for about 4 hours. By the end of the phone call, we were back together. And guess what? We even agreed to moving in together. I made him promise that he wouldn't be jealous anymore and that he would stop trying to control everything I did. He promised up and down that he would never be that way again. But literally 3 days later, he comes over super drunk, demanding you know what. I said no because my parents were home and I wasn't going to do that in the house with them. Then of course he starts threatening me again, saying that if I don't do it, I don't love him and blah blah blah. So I took advantage and I kicked him out of the house. Then he sent me an essay of a text message breaking up with me and telling me how he doesn't love me anymore. It's been 2 months since that happened. Once again, I'm doing great at work. My family and I are super happy, but I actually miss him. Not only do I miss him, I'm so jealous all the time because I see he's posting girls on his Instagram. I miss being with him and I miss having fun with him, but I don't miss always feeling scared and nervous. I even tried dating a few guys, but nobody compares to him. A few weeks ago, I went on a date with this really nice guy. We connected and went on a few more dates. I posted on my story that I was on a date and my ex went crazy. He actually showed up at the restaurant and told me to come out and talk to him. And I did. I literally left the guy that I was on a date with to go speak to my ex. He told me to leave with him and I said no. He grabbed my purse and threw it on the ground and told me that he would never speak to me again. 3 days later, he was back in my messages begging to see me. But the guy that I was on a date with actually really likes me and asked me to be his girlfriend. I don't know what to do. I love my ex and I want to get back with him, but I know he's crazy. But this new guy's really nice and really caring. What do I do? Part 2 of how my parents tried to sell me off to a strange man so that he could marry me. I found out about the truth that my dad owed $100,000. He basically told me that the only way we were going to save our family was if I married this man, and that he offered my dad money in exchange for me. I mean, I was actually scared for my life because this man was known to everybody for being dangerous. I couldn't believe my mom was going along with it, but she said it was the only way that we weren't going to get our house taken away. They basically told me not to worry because I could always get a divorce from him. But of course, I didn't want to marry him at all. That very night, I snuck out of my house and went to my boyfriend's house. I told him everything my parents said and he was shocked. After discussing it for a few hours, we actually decided to run away. I knew I had to go back to my house, but when I looked at my phone, I had 10 missed calls from my parents. When I got home, they were waiting for me at the gate. And guess what? The strange man was there. My parents casually introduced me to this man. And when I looked at him, he was about 20 years older than me. He looked me up and down and handed my dad a check. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my parents tried to sell me off to a strange man so that he could marry me. This is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. The man looked me up and down and just stared at me. He handed my dad a check. That's when I yelled out that I was gonna go pack my stuff. Quickly packed a bag and escaped through my window. Luckily, my room was on the first floor. I ran for a few blocks where my boyfriend was in his car. Once I got in, we turned off our phones and drove an hour away. Then he told me he had a surprise for me. We got to this strange house and he told me to get out. When we went inside, there was a woman waiting for us. That's when he got down on one knee and gave me a ring. He told me that he would marry me in order to save my my life. Everything happened so fast and we got married. When I turned on my phone, I had 100 missed calls from my parents. I told them what happened and they begged me to come back home. When I got there, the strange man was there waiting for me. My now husband and I tell him to leave me alone. Thankfully, he ended up leaving. A few months later, my parents were debt-free. My mom sold all her jewelry and my dad sold his cars and a few other things. They should have done that from the beginning instead of trying to sell me. It's been 2 years since all that happened and I'm still married. The strange man has tried to contact me through Instagram. He offered me money once again to marry him. I told my parents and they think we should get a restraining order. What do you guys think we should do?